Cinemajaw is sponsored by Cards Against Humanity. They asked us not to read an ad. Enjoy the show. You're listening to Cinemajaw, the greatest movies podcast ever. Recorded on location at Cards Against Humanity in Chicago. My name is Matt Kay, and with me is...
Rye, the movie guy, and sitting behind the glass inside the fish tank is Fill Me In Phil.
How's it going, guys?
This week on Cinemajaw, Matt, we go to the cemetery. We take out our lists and we bury them.
Oh, really? I was thinking I would exhume my list. So I brought a shovel.
I see.
Yeah.
Good thinking.
Well, I wrote it years ago. This is a topic near and dear to my heart.
The list this week, Jawheads, our top 5 favorite cemetery scenes.
Yes, and we're doing this in honor of course, our theme of the month, Stephen King, and the new Pet Sematary movie.
Right.
Kind of makes sense.
It's actually shocking that we haven't done cemetery scenes with you being a co-host this long. Because this is such your topic,
Well,
buddy.
I think the reason is you always get your way, Ryan, and I never get a word in edgewise.
I had fun doing research on cemetery scenes and graveyards. There's some good ones.
There is, yeah. I mean, and it opens it up to a lot of things you don't think about, too. There's a lot of comedy. There's obviously horror, funeral scenes, sad scenes, melodrama, everything.
Yeah, so get thinking of your favorite scenes, Jawheads. Besides that, Matt, we also have a great guest who's going to be joining us this week.
Yes, we do. Joe Chappelle. He's a screenwriter, producer, director of film and television, perhaps best known for his work on The Wire. He's going to be joining us today.
Yeah, he has a long list of credits, so it's going to be exciting to talk to Joe.
Right. He's got a new show coming up. We're going to talk all about
I know.
that. Very exciting.
Very exciting. Besides that, we even have more going on. Do we not, Phil?
Oh, yeah, this week we are also going to go eye for an eye on Red Joan.
And we have 2 reviews, Pet Sematary and Hellboy.
Nice. And since we are going eye for an eye on Red Joan, which is about a spy, I'll tell you that much, I thought this is a good time for you, Matt, to take Joe on in spy movie trivia.
Oh, okay. I like my Bond, as everybody knows, so interesting.
Yeah, we'll see where that goes.
Okay.
All right, so let's get this thing rolling. We are celebrating Stephen King this month, and I believe that means, Phil, you have a fact.
Yes, this week, in honor of Stephen King, the king of horror, we celebrate with this fact. Stephen King famously dislikes the Stanley Kubrick adaptation of The Shining and once described it as a big, beautiful Cadillac with no engine inside it, branding the director's vision of Wendy, played by Shelley Duvall, opposite Jack Nicholson's Jack Torrance, of course, one of the most misogynistic characters ever put in film. Though King remains a fan of Kubrick himself, he has deemed him a terrifically smart guy behind some of the movies that mean a lot to me. King has reignited his disdain for The Shining in the pages of his novel, The Outsider. In the book, the character is watching Kubrick's 1957 war film, Paths of Glory, because it's better than The Shining. And that is your Stephen King Cinemajaw fact.
I think he's dead wrong about The Shining, man. It's one of my favorites.
It's interesting when you write something, though, that is your creation, and then you see it adapted into something different.
Have you read the book?
I have not.
I honestly haven't either. I've read a lot of King. I've read a lot of his novels, just not that one. Got to give it a read.
Yeah. I got to rewatch the movie. It's been a little while.
I've rewatched it recently. It's still amazing.
Nice.
You know what did it was Ready Player One. I had to sit down and watch the whole movie again. So
good reminder to do so.
Indeed.
All right, Matt. So without further ado, we do bring in our guest. His name here is Joe Chappelle, like Dave.
Yeah.
Right?
That's exactly how he introduced himself to us.
He is the director of An Acceptable Loss, and also he is working on a new program called The Godfather of Harlem. Joe, welcome to Cinemajaw.
Thanks, guys. It's great to be here.
I mentioned at the top of the show that you have a slew of credits. You've been working for quite a long time in the television and film industry.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to 1994 when I wrote and directed an independent film called Thieves Quartet. And since then, I've been working, knock on wood, fairly steadily in film and television.
Well, one of my questions was, and I guess we can start here. So we have a lot of people that come on, younger guys that are writing a film or trying to get something off the ground, like you did with Thieves Quartet. Your next film credit was Halloween 6.
Which I was going to bring up for sure.
So how did that transition from you write and direct a small movie like Thieves Quartet to getting, I would imagine this is like a studio job, somebody comes to you to direct Halloween 6. What transpires there?
Well, what happened was Thieves was a very small budget movie, shot here in Chicago with all local Chicago actors and crew people we had worked with. My wife, Colleen Griffin, produced the movie. And it was all people we had either worked with in the commercial industry, which is where we had a small commercial production company at the time, or people we even met in film school up at Northwestern. So that was our crew. It was very small, and this was back in the day where we still shot film and processed film. So I think half our budget or a third of our budget was just film stock, which you wouldn't have to pay for today. Labor of Love, was, like I said, was shot in the winter of 1993. We completed it in 94. And this was back in the day where there were very small film distributors who would get your film in a theater in New York. And we went to this is a film market that no longer exists. It was the IFFM, the Independent Feature Film Market in New York City. We took the picture there. We found one of these very small distributors who literally, after the film opened, went out of business 3 weeks later. It was one of those things. But because they released it in New York and we got reviewed, and the film got pretty good reviews. It got a nice write-up in Variety and the Hollywood Reporter and the New York Times. So off that, I started getting calls from, because I didn't have an agent at the time. People just knew we were from Chicago, and I don't know how they tracked us down, but I was getting calls from, like, who are you? And we'd like to meet you. And so I went out to Los Angeles. And when I was going out for the very first time, because I'd never been there before, friends of ours who were writers here in town, they had an agent. And they said, when you're out in LA, you should talk to our agent. So I was like, great, because I didn't know anybody. I went out and met, and actually, this is the story's even better because it just tells you in terms of how luck really comes into playing this kind of thing. So I'd sent the film. This is back in the day when you had VHS, and I sent the film, FedEx the film out to her to watch. And so this is like, say, on a Friday. So that same Friday, she gets a call from the producer of Halloween, what's going to be Halloween 6, saying their director just dropped out. And who do you have? And she said, well, I just talked to this guy from Chicago.
No way.
It was like that. It sounds like he's got a very interesting movie. He's sending it out to me, and as soon as I get it, I'll send it to you. And I think what happens, so we say it was FedExed out Friday. She got it Monday. I think she literally just had it messengered over to the producer's office. He watched it, liked it, and then so he forwarded. This is now Dimension Films, which was the Miramax genre division at the time, was in it was a co-production with them and Mustafa Akkad, who still owns, or well, he's passed away, but his
estate owns it.
His nephew runs it. Malik Akkad runs the franchise. Anyway, so the producer, a guy named Paul Freeman, forwarded the movie to them. They liked it, and it was one of those things where they were supposed to start shooting in like 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh my God!
Yeah, so. I got hot because
trial by fire.
Yeah, because they fired the original directors. What I found out, and I got hired, and so I kind of came in late, and that's how. But it was really one of those things where it was luck. It was just timing that I had just happened to reach out to the agent who I ended up signing with, and she had just happened to that day talk to the producer who had just happened to fire a director, They watched the film Monday. I think I went out there. I went to New York on Thursday of that week, and I was hired by the next week.
That's crazy.
So it was one of those crazy, but it's just being at the right place, right time, and.
And were you a fan of the Halloween franchise, or did you have to really catch up quick and watch some of these movies?
I had seen the first one, of course, which was was a brilliant movie, and I think I had I don't think I'd seen the second one, but I'd seen the third one, which has nothing to do with the other two.
Right. Yeah. Season of the Witch. Yeah.
But I hadn't seen Halloween 4 and Halloween 5, so I had to catch up.
Mm-hmm. And then the film after that, you get to work with what I would deem Hollywood royalty, Peter O'Toole in Phantoms.
Oh, that was...
what's that?
That
all
was...
of a sudden like...
That was unbelievable. I was a huge Peter O'Toole fan. And if you grew up, when I grew up in the 60s and 70s, he's been so many amazing movies, right? So many amazing movies. And but also he'd heard all the, he's a drinker,
Right.
he's an alcoholic, and
There was that movie that he made that was sort of mimicked his
my
life.
favorite year was
Right.
definitely but my experience with him was I loved him. He was always ready. He was word perfect on set. If he did drink, I couldn't tell. And he was just such a really great, pleasant guy. I'll tell you just one story, in terms of just what a professional he was.
Sure, yeah.
So I don't know if you've seen the movie, but there's at the climax, he has his character, Dr. Flight, has this big speech, and he's calling out to this monster to show itself so they can try to kill it. And we shot it was in Georgetown, Colorado, is where we shot the movie. And so we shot the night of his big speech. It snowed, but it was beautiful snow. It was that really soft, kind of like, just kind of
The
wet,
fluffy stuff?
perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And he came out and he, big speech, and of course it's one of those things where you're shooting night, so it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and and at the time he was no kid, he was in his 60s, but he nailed it, right? So it's like he just nailed it, and it was like, okay, home run. We got the big speech of the movie. We got it, and we're done. And he's happy. I'm happy. We're all good. But the next day, and this is back still shooting film, when you get dailies.
Oh no! Is this like a lens cap or something?
It's moisture in the lens.
Oh no!
So which basically had a fogging effect on it.
Yeah.
How bad? Unusable.
Unusable.
Yeah.
Unusable. So it's like, oh my God, how can I go back to talk to Pete? First of all, like the setting was perfect and all worked. So I got to go talk to Peter O'Toole and say we have to go redo this. It's like he's going to, any other actor would just be like, would tear your head off or just be really, really unhappy. So me and the producer, we went into his dressing room and just started to say, Peter, we have some bad news. And then, the scene last night or 2 nights ago, whatever it was, we got the dailies back, and we because of the moisture. And before I could even finish the story, he just said, done. Like, I'll do it again. Just because he was
just a
professional and a trained actor. And if I did it once, I've done stage, I'll do it again. So that just told you what the guy, what he was like. And so I was like, something like that happens. I was fairly young at the time, and to have him act that way and was like amazing. It was great.
That is great, man. So you've done a lot of TV too, and we'll get to some of the credits there. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, where the line between TV and film is kind of blurring now. How do you feel about that?
I think it's great. When I started doing television, back around the turn of the century, which is a weird way of putting it, but it really was around 2000. TV had a very formulaic, kind of a meat and potatoes kind of shooting style, and I always tried to, coming in even back then, is to try to make it cinematic. I was always, every time I go out, I direct anything. I say I'm going out and I'm trying to make Citizen Kane. I know I'm not going to do it. I'm going to come up short, but I always come in with that mindset.
Yeah.
In TV, certainly on network TV back then, there are limitations. You only have so much time. You're just very limited. But within those limitations, I always try to make it cinematic. So I've always tried to bring that mindset to it. And I think what's been great over the last 20 years since I've been doing it is like that more TV's become much more cinematic as time's gone on.
There's no doubt that you've influenced that. I'm serious.
I
at
would
least
love to think that, but I just think it was
a degree. Yeah,
it's been an oncoming thing, and there's so many great directors now, and showrunners, are embracing that. It's still TV is still a writer's medium for sure, and really both the writers and the network, they want to see the dialogue in close up. They really want to see that, but there is room to go, to do wider shots and more, just more cinematic ways of telling a story.
For sure. And one of those, if you just go back not long ago, that sort of bridged that gap there was the television show Fringe, which had a huge cult following. And it was one of those shows that seemed the network didn't know exactly how to market it. Was it going to get canceled? And the fans kept this thing alive because people loved Fringe. And you've directed, I don't know, what was it, 30 episodes or something?
It might have been. I was there for 3 years. I don't know.
What a great show!
It was a great show, and you're right. I meet fans today of that show, and they are like the most diehard. I remember when, as you were right, you were correct, is that every season we finished, we were like, are we coming back? Are we going to get canceled? And I remember Kevin Riley, who was who ran Fox at the time, which was the studio, he said, Fringe has some of the most dedicated, I forget how he put it, but basically the most dedicated fans out there, all 50 of them. But then all 50 of them wrote, really strong letters to the network saying, keep the show on. And that was it was a fan, the fans really kept it on. I mean, of course, the network wanted to stay in the J.J. Abrams business because it was a bad robot show, but it was really the fans. I mean, and to this day, they're the most vocal, and people love that show.
Yeah, they're out there for sure.
And that brings us to The Wire, which is this acclaimed juggernaut of a show. There's universities that I believe even teach classes now
Absolutely, yeah.
about The Wire. Entertainment Weekly a few years back named it the greatest television show of all time. You've directed like 6 episodes. I want to say one every season, or just about.
When I directed an episode season 1, and on season 3 I came on as a producer director. When I would end up directing 2 a year.
Okay.
Basically.
What was it like there? I mean, when you're reading a script like that, you got something very special in the Wire.
Yeah, I remember when I got my script for the episode I got season 1, which I think was the 7th episode of the show, maybe the 6th. And so they sent me the scripts, and I was reading them, and I had to read them twice because I had never heard dialogue like that before. Not let alone television, but movies. I mean, I'd never heard not even the drug speak or the gang speak, but the cop speak was like a foreign language. And so I knew reading that, I was like, oh man, there's something here. This is really, really good. Or at least it was certainly my wheelhouse in terms of that kind of genre and the cops. But it was so original and so fresh. It just jumped off at the page for me. And I remember when I went there to direct that episode, we sat, we get an episode, and this is one of the few shows where which we did, where you'd have a cast readings. Everybody would come in, and before you go into production, you get the cast, and we would do it over the lunch while the preceding episode was shooting, and you read the script basically.
Right.
And the cast, they had no idea that this show was working or not, because. Now remember, this is 2002, something like that, and if you remember, the show,
pre-social media.
It's pre-social media, and you feel the show. It's a really slow-moving show. It was one of the first shows where this season was a story. Mm-hmm. So by the time I got there, episode 5 or 6, it was the story is just starting to kick in, but the cast was like, is this working? Is this interesting to watch? And I had seen a couple of the episodes. They sent me some cuts further on. I was like, guys, this is working. But they weren't sure because it was so different and so not television, so not. I mean, to me, when I read it, is like it would have been and I'm a huge Sidney Lumet fan, but it would be like the most incredible Sidney Lumet movie. Mm-hmm. In terms like if you've seen Serpico and Prince of the City, it was like that. I mean, I kind of felt like it was in that world.
Very slow burn,
but the payoff is like really great. And but even to me, the slow burn I love because it just you can just see them setting if you watch the show where setting the characters and just setting up what's going to happen.
Placing all the dominoes.
And it was all so, and David Simon and his writers, they had it all mapped out. So it was all calibrated, and it was pretty amazing. It was just to be a small part of it was awesome.
That is awesome, man.
Totally. We're going to talk some Chicago Fire after the break on the second interview. Yeah. So that brings us to An Acceptable Loss. Your wife was kind enough to come grace us with her presence on Cinemajaw and talk about the film. And, of course, the movie stars Jamie Lee Curtis. And you hadn't done a movie for a while after you'd done all this television. Yes. What was it like to switch back gears into TV? Into film? It
was great. It was something I've been wanting to do for a long time. I mean, I've loved working in television, but as I said, it's a writer's medium.
What do you mean by that?
It's so the showrunner, the head writer on the show. If you've heard the term showrunner,
sure, of course.
It's their vision. So as a director, or as in my case, a producer director, you come on. You're fulfilling someone else's vision, mm-hmm. and that's the job, and I love doing it. But to go back into a film where I was the writer director, I would and for good or for bad, I could own it, and that's what I really wanted to do. And I also, having worked on Chicago Fire for a number of years, and I just wanted to do something where that didn't adhere to a formula. And a lot of that's what network television is. There's,
Sure.
It's formula. Every act break, there has to be something dramatic that happens. And I kind of wanted to go back to the slow burn type way of storytelling, and those are the movies that I like. So it was just an opportunity for me to. I'm so fortunate. I feel so fortunate I was able to do that again. And so it was very liberating to to sort of set a tone and set a look, and commit to it, and I didn't look back, which was scary, but it was great.
That's awesome, man.
And 2 strong female performances in the film, which I think is the right time for that.
It's the story behind that is I'll try to tell it quickly. The origin story for the movie, An Acceptable Loss, was I had watched 2 Errol Morris documentaries. One was The Fog of War, which is about Robert McNamara, who was
Sure.
the Secretary of Defense during Vietnam. And the other one was The Unknown Known, which is about Donald Rumsfeld, who was Secretary of Defense during the second Iraq invasion. And if you've seen those movies, it's both those men looking back upon these wars or catastrophes that they oversaw. And what struck me was the contrast between the 2 guys, because McNamara, when he looks back on his war, was he doesn't come out and say we're sorry, but
There's clear regret.
Guilt. He's burdened by guilt, and you could tell he's going to take it to his grave with him. And then you contrast that with the Rumsfeld movie, where he was like, we knew what we knew, and I would do it again based on what I knew. I have no looking back, no sense of maybe we blew this, maybe. Anyway, I just thought that was a really cool dynamic to explore in a movie. And then so when I pitched the idea to Colleen, my wife producer, she thought it was pretty interesting, but she said, what if it was 2 women? And I was like, why not? Because the timing seems to be going in that direction. And this is back, when I broke the stories back in 2015 or so it seemed like Hillary Clinton was going to be president, so I was like, why not?
Sure.
Let's embrace it. So yes, but to have those two characters to be women was, I think, still is fairly unusual. And what I do like about it is, especially, is they're not saints. They're flawed, 3-dimensional characters.
I agree. Yeah.
Yes, and you can find An Acceptable Loss on video on demand, I believe, pretty much everywhere.
It's
correct?
everywhere now. I think as of today or something, it went everywhere. So please check it out.
Yeah.
Oh, I highly encourage it.
What I do is I have a Roku. I don't know if you use this feature, but you can actually, there's a search feature on the Roku.
I'm using the Fire Stick now, man. I gave up on
maybe
the Roku.
Fire Stick has this too.
Okay.
But I'm saying you're not even in a particular app. You know?
Yeah.
You're just using the Roku, and you search whatever movie. So you put in An Acceptable Loss, and it tells you everywhere you can purchase it, what the cost is. It's the best. What a world we live in.
Ryan, you got to get a Fire Stick, because then you could just say, hey, Alexa, play An Acceptable Loss, and bingo, it pops right up. You don't even have to touch anything, man.
Wow.
That could be expensive, though, if you just start pulling any title out of the air and you get charged for it, right?
No. If it does require a next step to pay, it'll stop right there.
Oh, okay.
But it'll bring you
There's
to
a
that
fail-safe
page.
there.
You don't have to search for it or try to type, and
Okay.
it's just so much more convenient, Ryan.
Yeah.
Get on board.
Good stuff. So Joe is going to be sitting in on this entire Jaw. If we wanted to guide the Jawheads, the listeners, to a website, where would you want them to go? An Acceptable Loss website?
To learn more about what you got.
I think it would be the IFC website. The IFC is distributing the movie, IFC Films. Go to their website, and it will direct you how you can go about and look at the movie, rent the movie.
Awesome.
Cool.
Or buy the movie.
Even more with Joe. We got to talk to Chicago Fire and plus Godfather of Harlem on the second interview.
Okay.
Now, we like to end our guest interviews, Joe, with a silly cinema cue. Phil, do you got something good for Joe?
Yeah, Joe. So since it's not only Stephen King month, but it's also Cemetary week, in honor of Pet Sematary, I wanted to ask you what the lamest reanimated pet would be. Because not every pet's scary, right? Like a goldfish flopping up. Nothing.
You ever see those magic carp, Phil? I know you have.
Well, who do you ask? Why, did you forget who's back here?
The lamest.
Yeah. Pet rocks, Tamagotchis, they all
you're
count.
taking all the good ones, man.
Yeah, really, yeah.
Sorry.
My first instinct would say turtle because they're so slow, but then I think, what was the gamma? What was the Japanese monster? Gamera.
Gamera,
right? So
Yeah.
Gamera was kind of scary, so I can't use Gamera. So can you get back to me on that one?
Yeah, of course,
All right.
man.
It's a good question, Phil.
An undead Tamagotchi, though, that's kind of terrifying.
It would probably just nag you about cleaning up its poop. Who knows?
All right, so Joe is going to be sitting in on this entire jaw. He has his top 5 cemetery scenes. Have you filmed in a cemetery?
I was thinking about that today. Yes, I know we shot a couple cemetery scenes on Fringe. And maybe on Fire too, but definitely, I remember being up because we shot that in Vancouver, and there was couple episodes we were just one specific cemetery we'd always go to. And actually on this new show, Godfather of Harlem, we shot in a cemetery in New York City.
Nice.
We're lucky living here in Chicago. There's actually some beautiful cemeteries that are really fun to walk through and look at all the monuments and stuff. And
What the hell are you talking about?
Listen.
Fun to walk through?
You might think it's a little macabre, but the one, and it's not the Graceland Cemetery. It's
You talking about the one in the city here?
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the name of it.
There's a nature preserve in there, like hiking trails and stuff. The one that goes along Western Avenue at like Pratt. Rose Hill
We're
Cemetery.
Being told it's Rose Hill.
There's like Civil War veterans in there, tons of history, hundreds of years worth of history. And yes, I find it enjoyable to walk through and look at all the
So
art.
that's what you do on your day off.
Yeah, bring the kids, make a picnic.
All right,
It's fun.
let's continue on, Phil. Eye for an eye.
This week, Eye for an Eye, Red Joan. The story of Joan Stanley, who is exposed as the KGB's longest-serving British spy. This is based on a true story of a spy whose real name was Melita Norwood. She worked undercover for almost 40 years. The film stars Judi Dench, and it's directed by Trevor Nunn, who is best known for directing stage work in London. Ryan, we're going to throw it on over to you.
I love me some Judi Dench. But I think we've seen a lot of these spy movies. Even though this is based on a true story, I'm usually a sucker for those.
Yeah.
I don't know. I watched the trailer for this one. I'm not really that interested.
How could you say that?
I know.
You're not into genre films? I mean,
Hey, that's it.
okay, then I'll go next.
Yeah.
Ready? Interested.
Oh, wow.
I mean, who doesn't want to see Judi Dench, M herself, turn heel? You know, be the bad guy for a change. I'm ready for that, big time.
Joe?
Interested.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome. The spy genre is one of my favorite genres. She's a great actress. Trevor Nunn, I don't know if he's directed any movies before. I do know him from his stage work, so that might be interesting. It might not, but I'll say it's interesting just for the subject matter.
Phil, where do you land?
I hate to do this to you, Ryan, but I'm also pretty interested too. I'd say one of the few things that I like more than a spy movie is a female-led spy movie. I think, right, like Atomic Blonde was awesome. I don't think it's going to be quite that good, or at least entertaining.
Well, I doubt Judi Dench is going to be throwing any punches.
Yeah. But
I don't know.
But there's something cool to me, much like an Acceptable Loss. Like there's something cool about how much we don't see.
Sure.
This kind of thing. So
I think this one's more Tinker Tailor kind of speed.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
But that's great.
More
Tinker
sneaking
Tailor,
Judi
around,
Dench, I just
getting
looked it up.
information.
84 years old.
No.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow. I
She's-
would not have guessed that.
No.
And still helming a film. That's great. That's great.
and killing it.
Absolutely.
All right. 3 interesteds, 1 ignore for Red Joan. We'll try to get a review out for the Jawheads, man.
We will, for sure.
Speaking of new movies, in 2013, Carrie became the first Stephen King adaptation to get a remake. Then 2 years ago, 2017, we got a box office smash with the remake of It. So why not dip back into the King library and pull out another film to update? This time around, we have Pet Sematary, a film originally released in 1989. Matt, I was not a very big fan of the 89 version, so I happily made my way to the back of the house for a cemetery visit once again. Let's see if this film's resurrection was a smart idea or a sinister shell of itself.
Daddy. What's going on?
Hug your daughter.
I should never have shown you that place. Your child is not the only thing that will come back.
The barrier is broken.
The film opens with an innocent family of 4 moving into a new house in Ludlow, Maine. Jason Clarke plays Lewis, the father of the family and doctor working at the university hospital. In no time at all, their young daughter Ellie sees a creepy procession of kids bringing their dead dog to a cemetery. She discovers there's a pet cemetery behind their house. It is here, Matt, she also meets their next-door neighbor, Judd, played by John Lithgow. When Lewis discovers the family's cat has been killed by a car, he decides to hide that fact from the children. With the help of Judd, he buries the cat in an ancient burial ground. The next day, to Lewis's amazement, the cat returns. It's more aggressive and something seems off, but the cat is alive again. Now the question is, if something were to happen to one of his children, would he do the same thing? Matt, for starters, did this updated version do anything to improve on the original? And secondly, with you already knowing the story, was the film able to scare you?
I'll take the second part of that question first. I think there's nothing more horrifying, and I mean that in the truest sense of the word, than bad things happening to kids. Like, I can watch the scariest, most gory, disgusting, or even disturbing horror movies as long as there's no kids in it. The second I see a kid on screen, I am just aching. And maybe that's the dad in me coming out. I don't know. But I lost my taste for that. Like, The Mist devastated me at the end. Did this movie improve upon things from the original? Absolutely. The production values alone drastically improved. I mean, listen, the cast in the first one, not so good. Fred Gwynne, he was resurrected to act in that movie. I love the guy, but it was definitely Fred Gwynne past his prime. The ending and the changing, this is right in the trailer, I'm not spoiling anything. It's not Cage who dies, it's Ellie who dies. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that works better. It makes more sense. She's the one that's connected with the neighbor Judd. She becomes the catalyst for all the bad things that happen subsequently from her death onward. It just made more sense to me. Even though the more tragic death would be the toddler, hers actually made more sense. And then the ending, I don't want to spoil it, but whoa, very effective. I mentioned The Mist before. This is up there with The Mist. It's a very bleak, dark ending, but I found it delightful.
I do think that the overall atmosphere of this movie is a little creepier than the original.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think this is a movie where it jumps out and scares you.
There's a few moments,
But
like a
not
cat
really.
jumps out of nowhere, you weren't expecting it.
It wasn't too bad, but I think the overall atmosphere, especially when Ellie comes back from,
There's some-
being resurrected,
Oof.
that entire vibe of her being in the house.
Yeah.
And at one point she's in the bathtub and Jason Clarke is brushing her hair and it's all knotty. And there's just something about that moment. It was just so creepy and gross.
Well, how about when he's laying in bed next to her and he starts to really, the gravity of the situation is finally sinking into him. He's not like, I just need to see my daughter again at any cost. Okay, you've done it, and now you're next to your resurrected zombie daughter in bed trying to get her to go to sleep, reading her good night stories. It's a heavy moment.
Now, there are flashbacks in this movie to the wife has a sick sister.
Yeah, Zelda.
Zelda. And I couldn't remember if those were that present in the original.
Yes.
They were?
In the book and in the original movie, yes.
So there were flashback scenes like that.
Yes.
Well, I thought these were pretty graphic of her illness, just her bony body. I think they really amplified that this time around.
Well, I mean, if you go back to the original, it's more like Cronenberg-esque sort of bubbly makeup. So they did a better job on the makeup and prosthetics in this one. But no, it was there in the original.
Did Judd murder the cat?
Yeah.
Church, this is your question, to have a reason to actually go back past the deadfall?
Well, this is speculative on my part, but it seems rather convenient that Judd is the one that finds the body. I hope I'm not spoiling anything. You've seen this, the original at least, Joe?
I read the book a long time ago, but I'll tell you, the way you guys are talking about it, you're making me want to go see the movie.
That's good.
It's okay. It's definitely, we'll get to our recommendations at the end. So Judd, later in the film, is this spoiler territory here?
No, it's okay.
He says that you find the sweetest reasons to go back when he talks about why he brought the doctor up there to resurrect the cat. So did he kill the cat is the question.
I never thought, I don't think there's that deep of a twist in the movie. No, I didn't see that at all.
Well,
but now that you bring that question up, it's interesting to look at that scene in particular and wonder, maybe that was his motive. That's interesting.
Right? Did you notice the Easter egg, Ryan?
No.
All right. So the death of Ellie, she gets hit by a truck, just like the original film. They live, unfortunately, right next to a 2-lane, 60-mile-an-hour highway that is like a trucking lane.
And no fences around any yard.
Why would you have fences? Or why would you build the house like far back from the road? So yes, unfortunately, Ellie gets hit by a truck. In the original movie, the driver is listening to Sheena is a Punk Rocker, the Ramones song. That's why that's stuck in my brain. It's one of my favorite songs. In the remake, he is texting. Who's he texting? Sheena.
Wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
Nice little Easter egg there.
No, I completely missed that.
I caught that right away.
Yeah. All right. I was going to go with a question for the casting of John Lithgow, who plays Judd in the movie. I felt, and maybe I'm off on this, he's too familiar of a face to put in a horror film. I felt too comfortable with him. When I'm in a movie in a dark theater, I want to be jolted. And something about John Lithgow being there made me feel safe. I don't know if that makes any sense. Did you have that at all?
Well, honestly, I'd feel more safe with Jason Clarke, who I'm becoming a big fan of, actually. Holy crap, that guy can do any accent. He's Australian, and he pulled off an East Coaster beautifully. His accent's perfect.
He was okay here at best.
I love Jason
A little
Clarke.
too much credit. He was terrible in The Aftermath earlier this year.
I disagree.
No.
You're so wrong.
No way.
He carried that movie. It's a good movie. Okay, John Lithgow, no, I don't ever feel comfortable with John Lithgow. He's a complete unpredictable wild card of a dude. And he's getting older now. He's looking kind of grizzled, especially in this movie. He let his beard grow and stuff. They had some age makeup on him to just make him look like a bit dirty, outdoorsman, if you will. I don't feel comfortable with him. He's so wild. He could be very, very funny, and he can be very, very scary. John Lithgow has such a range that I did not get any comfort from his presence.
Favorite element or scene in this movie?
Favorite scene would have to be the ending. It's just so out of left field. I didn't know it was going to be there, as you know, it's different from the original and different from the book. So
what I
like
really
that.
liked, and maybe this was in the original, I don't remember it as well either, is that procession of kids bringing their dog to the cemetery.
Not in the original.
And they wear those creepy animal masks. And that whole shot, I thought, because this happens very early on in the film, maybe the first 15 minutes, really sets the mood for the movie.
Yeah, I like that too.
Enjoyed the heck out of it. You got a movie poster quote at all?
No, I didn't come up with one. Did you?
I went with time to bury this story.
Ah, boo. How many Jaws you giving this?
I'm going 2.5 Jaws.
You're 2.5 Jaws? You just took it apart.
It was okay. It was better than the original, I think, but I wasn't a huge fan of the original.
Yeah. Well, I say this is a 3-Jaw movie.
There you go.
What a great month for horror. Strangely enough, it's April. I don't know.
And Joe, I had a question putting on your director hat here. When you're directing something, since you've done some horror, it seems like a lot of times these movies, you got to have the right beat to bring the tension and or the scare, right? And does that happen more in the editing, or when you know, hey, this needs an extra second or two to really build the tension?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing you find in editorial, of course. And you if it's a jump type scare, you play with it, and should have come on, literally. And it's amazing how frames make a difference. Like just 12 frames, half a second. If something's off a half second, it can either
make or break.
Make or break a jump. And then also, it's what's done with the audio with it. If the sound effect or the music cue, whatever it is, backing it or not, letting things. Sometimes it's just as more effective letting it just be dry. You go and you shoot something like that, you got to get the pieces you're going to need to put it together, but really you'll fine tune it in post.
Yeah. All right, so 3 Jaws for Pet Sematary from Matt K, 2.5 from Ride the Movie Guy.
It's a damn good horror movie.
Yeah?
I think so.
Okay. I mean, you're more the horror guy, so.
Better than it?
No, not even close.
I'm also, I like the original 1990 version of it better. I think it is too big of a story to fit into one movie, and I guess they didn't, right? They broke it up into 2.
No.
I'll have to get back to you on that one. Probably
I
not.
got a clear answer. Not as good as it.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
It's closer for me, but I still think maybe it's better.
Well,
it's just a scarier character. Definitely.
Does bring us to our top 5 this week. In honor of this Pet Sematary review, we are doing our favorite cemetery scenes. We like to let the guests start, and we always ask, was this a difficult list for you to come up with, or was it fun and you knew what you were going with?
No, it was fun. It was interesting because when I heard the topic, I was like, oh, well, the first thing was, well, they're going to be all horror films. But then when I started thinking, okay, what cemetery scenes do I remember in movies? It was not that. I mean, it was a much wider list. It opened up to me.
I have almost no horror movies on mine. Only one do I have a horror film. So
me too. I have one also.
So let's get started with your number 5.
My number 5 is, and I thought, well, it's gonna be my obligatory horror picture. It's the original Night of the Living Dead. You know, the opening scene of that movie, right? It's a pretty scary.
Thank you. Can I just tell you a quick story?
Yes, please.
Before you got here, me and Ryan were talking, and I'm like, how many zombie movies do you have on this list? And he's like, none, 0. And I'm like, well, I mean, there's the Night of the Living Dead. And he's like, no, I watched it again today. It's not that good.
But part of that I was trying to goat Matt on. You know, I like to get him going.
I thought of other great horror, like The Omen. You know, there's really a lot of good horror, cemetery scenes. But that's my number 5 as my first one.
Hold right there.
What?
We're gonna go around like 5, 5, 5,
yeah.
4, 4, 4.
Thank you for stopping me before I.
Getting back to Night of the Living Dead, such a beautiful scene. They're coming to get you, Barbara. One of the best things ever committed to celluloid, in my opinion. I mean, it's utterly rewatchable, and it looks like it was shot yesterday. It's great.
I mean, I'll tell you about the thing. So it was made in 68, 69. Was that when it was?
Throw it in the fish tank.
No, we'll throw that in the fish tank.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, watched that movie. That was a movie. So this is back. The only way you could watch that movie when I was young was either a midnight show, which was I was too young to go see it, or it would be on some late night, like what's the
Svengoolie or something?
Svengoolie type thing, and you'd have to stay up at home and watch it by yourself. And that movie is so raw. And back then the prints were which actually kind of added to how creepy it was. The prints were beat up and it was scratchy and grainy. And I remember watching that when I was 10. And it scared the living. I won't say that. It was that, and that whole movie just kind of grabbed. Even with commercials thrown in back then, it's the scariest movie I think I've ever seen.
Wow, I don't disagree with you. I honestly also had Night of the Living Dead at my number 5, just because I wanted to make sure we talked about it. But if I have to sub one out, I'll go Army of Darkness. It's kind of a go-to. Bruce Campbell goes to collect the Necronomicon, and he famously botches the magic words to get the book, and then the dead rise, and all hell breaks loose.
It's a great scene.
It's an amazing scene. What you got, Ryan?
For sure. My number 5 might not be the best movie, definitely not the best in the series, but one heck of a cemetery scene. 2003, the film Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. Famously, Linda Hamilton not in this movie, right? And Arnold Schwarzenegger is back. And her character, Sarah Connor, has died. And so at one point they have to go to the graveyard cemetery to visit Sarah Connor's grave. Well, it turns out what she did was put all the guns and weapons in her casket. And you get this wonderful scene where they pull the casket out and Arnie's actually holding it on his shoulder. He's holding the casket, walking out
with a minigun in the other hand,
and a minigun in the other hand, and he just starts firing while he's holding this casket. And eventually, they get in the hearse. The other Terminator, who's a female Terminator at this time, pops up at the right time. A chase ensues through the cemetery.
The headstones exploding.
Wow, is it good fun? That is fun right there. That's a Terminator movie. That was my number 5, Terminator 3. Your number 4, Joe.
So this is me trying to branch out from horror and just look for thinking about cemetery scenes, which the first came right into my mind. The first one. So from my number 4 is the 1951 version of A Christmas Carol. It's a British made with the guy who played Scrooge was Alistair Sim, and the scene where ghost number 3 comes back and spirit number 3 takes him and shows him his gravestone.
Yeah.
Really effective.
It really is.
I've not seen that version.
That's the best for me. That's the best version. It's really good. Really atmospheric.
You don't like the Jim Carrey version?
No, I did not actually, but it's really atmospheric and just really kind of creepy.
The Muppets Christmas Carol's pretty good. Come on.
That is Colleen's favorite Christmas movie. Michael Caine as Scrooge. Colleen every Christmas really marches me and our children down in the basement to watch that Christmas.
Good for you, Colleen. That's awesome. I'm a fan too. All right. So sitting at number 4, guys, I'm going to be honest. I got a couple of zombie movies on my list here. Maybe I'm not too inventive, but I love this scene so much. I rewatched it again today just to make sure it's as great as I remember. Peter Jackson did a movie called Dead Alive. I believe it was originally titled Brain Dead, but it's Dead Alive here in the States. There's a scene where the main character is burying his zombified mom, and some punks come and attack him in the cemetery, and they start peeing all over her headstone and stuff. You know, they're drunk punks, and they're fighting, they're bullies, essentially. And the priest comes out, he's like, what's this going on in the graveyard? And wouldn't you know it, he happens to know Kung Fu. So he says, I kick ass for the Lord. And then he starts laying into these punks. Just then, the zombified mom comes out of her grave, bites one of the punks. He becomes a zombie in like 10 seconds. Bloodbath ensues. Limbs come off. The priest is beating them with the limbs. If you haven't seen this movie, you just have to. You just have to see it.
I saw it back when it came out. I just remember being so over the top. It was,
way over the top.
Funny.
But that scene in particular, I mean, it's really all about that line, I kick ass for the Lord, and then the priest starts doing Kung Fu.
It's good stuff right there. I went comedy with my number 4. I tried to come up with a really funny moment that took place in a cemetery, and rewatched this scene at work, and I was laughing out loud. I don't know if we've ever really talked on this movie on Cinemajaw. In 1991, it's a spoof movie called Hot Shots with Charlie Sheen and Lloyd Bridges, and this was a spoof on the movie Top Gun.
Among other action
actions, but that was the main storyline was Top Gun. And the scene here is they go to a funeral, and they go to the cemetery, and it already starts off screwballish. So like Lloyd Bridges walks in and says, God, I love a good funeral. And then there's people selling peanuts, concessions, but he's completely out of it, and he's off to the side, and they do a shotgun salute, and this tips him off where he thinks he's like back in the war, and he thinks he's being fired upon. Yeah. So at this point, he pulls out his gun, opens up the casket to get cover, starts firing at the shoulders.
Oh my God, I forgot all about that, dude.
Eventually, he throws a grenade. I mean, even people are running. It's over-the-top screwball comedy that you would appreciate from a Lloyd Bridges in a Hot Shot movie. He was great.
You have no right to make fun of any more of my picks at all.
Hey, I watched it again. It's very funny.
All right.
Hot Shots. I'm sticking with it. Into our 3s we go, Joe.
Okay, my number 3 is actually a tie, and I'm going to fish tank it because I don't remember the actual years of the two movies, but they were both cop movies or cop gangster movies from the mid to late 80s. And we can fish tank it, but so it's a tie between Internal Affairs, which was a Mike Figgis film director, which had Richard Gere in it. I don't know if you remember that movie.
I do.
And there's a really kind of warped funeral scene. It's Richard Gere, it's the funeral for William Baldwin, who is a cop that the Richard Gere character has killed because he was going to basically go to Internal Affairs and they were into bad stuff, But the Richard Gere had been sleeping with the William Baldwin's the character of his wife. And
like you do, yeah.
And she goes nuts, and she has this. She during the funeral she kind of attacks Richard Gere because she knows really what went down. And then Andy Garcia is there watching it, and it's this kind of crazy weird scene. And then, so I saw that, and then shortly thereafter, which is my tie here, it was Abel Ferrara's King of New York, which has another cemetery scene where it's about for a dead cop. And in that movie, it's Christopher Walken has this drug gang which the cops have declared war on. He's declared war on them. They've been going back and forth. And in this scene is Christopher Walken pulls up in the limo, and basically David Caruso, who's the cop, he shoots him in the head with a shotgun during the funeral.
Oh, jeez.
And it's I don't know if you haven't seen King of New York. This is a movie. This got an amazing cast. It's Walken. It's Lawrence Fishburne.
King of New York.
King of New York. It's a really cool gangster picture.
Yeah, it's like up there with like the best mob movies of all time.
It's so crazy good. Anyway, so I saw those two cop movies, bad cops. Kind of not able to fish tank the dates, but I just remember being kind of jumbled together. They kind of both came to mind, but they were, and it's interesting because they were daylight funeral scenes, but the subject matter and where those two scenes came in their respective movies was really great.
Wow.
Cool.
Good pick right there.
All right, that swings it to me at number 3. I'm getting away from zombies, and I'm going to the 90s, early 90s, with Heathers. There's a couple funeral scenes in this movie, and not to take away from I Love My Dead Gay Son, which was an awesome line, but the original funeral... Yeah,
that is great.
The original funeral of the first Heather, who dies... is a pretty funny scene because they all the students one by one walk up to her casket and say a prayer, and the audience is privy to their inner dialogue or monologue, I guess, and you hear each of their prayers, and they become escalatingly ridiculous and funny. Like the dumb jock guy is just like, saying, "Why'd you have to kill such a hot girl, God?" And like, it's ridiculous. It's a great scene from a great movie.
It is a great movie. My number 3, I do go horror. Here's my big horror pick, and it's maybe a cheesy horror at best. Matt, you'll hopefully like this one. Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason Lives.
I approve.
And the reason why I picked this one is this throws me back to my childhood when you would rent these kind of movies on VHS, and it was me and a buddy. House was dark, rent it, you put it on, and the movie opens with these two guys. The premise basically is that Jason is dead at this point, but they don't believe that he's completely gone. So their idea is that they're going to dig up the body and actually...
It's Tommy Jarvis, who's been traumatized by Jason.
I don't know my Friday the 13th. I know I've missed some of them. So he's actually going to burn Jason's body so that he can never come back. Well, they dig up his body, which is already creepy, and seeing the dead body underground.
Maggots and worms.
Right, it's really the good 80s gore. Through what year that movie came out also, Phil. And so what ends up happening, though, is they put a metal spike through his body.
Right. They're so angry with Jason.
Right. They turn their back, and lo and behold, maybe it's the same lightning bolt that sent the DeLorean back into time in Back to the Future. That lightning bolt strikes that metal post and actually breathes life back into Jason.
That's all it takes.
It's awesome.
I mean, we all saw Frankenstein. You can just bring someone back to life with lightning.
And that's where the movie goes. All of a sudden, we got a fresh Jason. He's back. What a scene, though.
Great scene.
Yeah, that was my number 3. Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason Lives. Never thought it would be on one of my top 5
I never thought it would be on one of your top 5s either. And at number 3, Jesus.
When you're doing this for almost 10 years, it's bound to come up, I guess.
and yeah, about time, actually.
Yeah. All right, into our 2s, Joe.
2, I went with a Western, and it speaks for itself. It's the climactic shootout of the good and the bad and the ugly.
Yes, yeah.
And
how classic.
How classic. It speaks for itself, and in the build up to the in that movie to that confrontation with those 3 guys. It's much more I can say about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just remember watching it because a lot of times I'm catching up on some of the classics. Mm-hmm. So this isn't even that long ago, and one of them that I had to watch and finally got around to seeing it, and it just lives up to the,
It's spectacular.
It is.
And I haven't watched that scene in a long time, but that's the one with the music that...
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. Just the music alone.
It's perfect.
It is.
If the movie ever comes back to the music box and you can see it on a big screen, go see that movie on a big
70
screen.
millimeter?
Yeah, or just a big, even just it's, in scope, it's such a beautiful movie.
Mm.
It is. It is. All right. I went with a spy movie here, and I'm actually going James Bond. This is a bit of a cheat because it's not in a cemetery, but there is a casket in the scene, and it's in New Orleans. So you could say the city the cemeteries are above ground. So in Live and Let Die, which was right in the middle of Roger Moore's run as Bond. The movie opens up with a second line procession through the streets of New Orleans. And there's a guy standing on the corner having a cigarette. He's a spy. And another man walks up to him as this, the brass band. And it's such a neat thing to see a funeral procession in New Orleans. You have to see it if you haven't. And he says, the original guy smoking a cigarette says to the person that just walked up, "Whose funeral is it?" And the guy says, "Yours." And he stabs him to death right there in the street. And the people who are carrying the casket come and just lower it on top of the body, pick it back up, and keep going like nothing happened. Such a cold-blooded, violent moment, even for a Bond film. I loved it.
I think that might have been Roger Moore's first Bond movie.
Was it?
We should
put that in the fish tank.
Yeah, throw that in the fish tank.
I think it was because it's
You
the
might
one
be
where
right.
Yaphet Kotto is the bad guy. It was because it was Bond up in Harlem. So I think
Right.
I think that was the first one.
Yeah.
You could be
We'll
right.
We'll find out. Swings it over to my number 2. I had this at number 1 for a while here. 2004, it's a Quentin Tarantino film, Kill Bill Volume 2. And this is the scene where they actually bury the bride,
The
who's
cruel
played by
tutelage of Pai Mei.
Uma Thurman.
Yeah.
Uma Thurman in the casket alive. And just watching them bury her is creepy as heck. And they put her down, they dump all that dirt back down on the casket. And what's his name?
Pai Mei,
Pai Mei. She got that punch,
the 1-inch punch.
and all of a sudden, just that 1-inch punch starts to pound at the casket. And the music that Tarantino uses there is just fantastic. It gets you so pumped as she starts to suddenly go through the wood and the dirt starts to come through the casket, and then it cuts to the scene of the bride just going right through the soil. And of course, a little comedy relief after that. She's like walking across into a diner right after that.
Yeah,
all
covered
just
in dirt. Yeah.
coming up from the grave. But I love that moment in Kill Bill Volume 2. One of my favorite scenes.
That's a great pick, Ryan.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah. All right, here it is. Number 1 pick for Cemetary Scenes, Joe.
Again, trying to think outside the box, but one of the first ones that came into my mind was the cemetery scene, the burial of Don Corleone in The Godfather. And it's the scene where Tessio comes up and tells Michael they want to make a meet, and that's how they know he's the traitor. And it's the reason it's in my mind is because I'm gonna plug my new show, Godfather of Harlem. I got to shoot in that cemetery in Brooklyn.
Nice.
But it's an amazing. It's an old New York cemetery. It's huge, and it just goes on and on and on. So, but anyway, that's a great scene, and it's one of my all-time favorite movies too.
No arguments here, man.
Yeah,
That's
you
a
can't
great
argue
scene.
with The Godfather.
Right?
Right?
All right, that brings it to my number 1, and I have a movie I'm sure Ryan's never heard of. I wonder if Joe's heard of this one. It is known in the States as Cemetery Man, but the original title is Della Morte dell'Amore. It's an Italian.
Rupert Everett.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. Oh my God. It is.
Of course, Rupert Everett.
It's one of the most surreal and sort of heady. Honestly, like it's a bit of a mind-bending zombie movie. At its heart, it's just a stupid zombie movie. But then it really asks some pretty deep existential questions toward the end of the movie. Mm-hmm. But the whole journey as you're getting there, there's some pretty wild shenanigans going on. And the one I wanted to highlight in particular, this guy lives in the graveyard to put down reanimated corpses who might happen to pop up in the night. That's his job. And he has a friend/assistant who's a grave digger, mostly mute, certainly a bit of a village idiot type character, falls in love with a girl who dies, and he takes it upon himself to exhume her body. What his intentions were, I won't speculate on. But she is reanimated. She comes back to life, and as he's trying to lift her body out of the casket, her head comes off. So he doesn't skip a beat. He just keeps the head. And there's a scene where he's making out with the head. The head walks on its own somehow, and it attacks people when it gets thrown in the air. Great movie. That scene in particular, a highlight for sure.
Wow.
It's a really good movie, Ryan. You have to write that down on your list.
It is. It's if you haven't, check it out.
Yeah, look at I'm writing it down. Okay, my number 1. I also went with a classic of sorts, and it's funny because we brought this one up when we did Motorcycle Scenes, and I was talking about how for a movie of this magnitude, I have not talked about it much, but it also contains a great cemetery scene, and it's in New Orleans with the above ground graves. I'm speaking of Easy Rider, which is where it's basically known as the acid graveyard scene.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to make a movie about sort of the drug culture and the whole scene, to try to transport the audience, you need to have a moment like this in the graveyard with this voiceover of them talking, and they're licking like the tombstones, and it is just a whacked out scene for a couple of minutes. You're like, what the heck is going on? And it gives you that headspace of like, yeah, these guys are high, and it totally works. It's like, wow, this is out there. And again, I think it really does come down to the setting of being in one of those New Orleans cemeteries.
They're pretty special.
They are. And I know when I was in New Orleans, I mean, you could just do tours of the cemeteries because they're all those above ground tombs. It's creepy.
They're very famously haunted, and there's some pretty interesting people buried in New Orleans. I think Poe is buried there.
I believe you're right.
Yeah. Could be wrong.
He might be Baltimore. I think he was. I spent some time in Baltimore. I know he lived there. He might be right about it.
Well, throw that in the fish tank. We might as well.
Madame Curie, though, right? The
Yes.
voodoo practitioner.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. So my number 1, Easy Rider. Any honorable mentions not come up on your list, Matt?
Old school blues funeral, where He's singing "Dust in the Wind."
That's a great one.
It's ridiculous and funny. I could name just about every zombie movie, but just one more: Return of the Living Dead, which is where the genre split, and a lot of people poo-poo it because it's not a Romero zombie movie. But I think it added more to the lore of zombies. This is the first time zombies eat brains was in this movie, et cetera, et cetera. But the graveyard scene with the punk rock girl Trash, she does this dance. It's pretty provocative, let's say. And anytime there's punks in a graveyard in a zombie movie, I'm pretty interested.
Other honorables for me: It's a Wonderful Life also has the graveyard scene. Back to the Future 2, more or less the same thing, where
he sees his own grave.
No, I think it's his dad.
Okay.
George McFly, but more or less that same idea. And then, last but not least, I ripped the movie to shreds last year, The Nun, which was a spin-off of the Conjuring movies. But the best scene in that movie is there's a little cemetery outside of the convent chapel, church, whatever thing is called, where the nuns are living, where a priest gets trapped into a coffin. One of the bodies comes alive, and that's where I was explaining they have those bells that would come out above all the
right, it was an old superstition.
Right, in case you were buried alive, you could ring that bell. And so that comes into play.
What about
and that was
Ryan
really
Reynolds?
well done.
What about that Ryan Reynolds film where he's in the coffin?
But not so much a cemetery.
He's in a coffin.
Buried.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just along those lines, that the original, was it The Vanishing, where the guy's buried alive inside the. There was a remake, an American remake with Chip, but the original Danish version was when he wakes up inside the in the casket. And he's got the lighter, and he's trying. That was horrifying. But so if you can find the original, that's worth seeing.
There we go. If we missed your favorite cemetery scene and you have Twitter pulled up, shoot us a tweet at Cinemajaw, or you can write us an email, feedback@cinemajaw.com. Listen to the rain come, Matt.
Yeah, it's a deluge.
When we come back, we are going to play some spy movie trivia plus a review of Hellboy. Stick with us.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the...
In honor of Cinemajaw's Stephen King month, Ryan, Matt, Corbin the intern, and I float too.
Hi, Georgie. Aren't you going to say hello? Oh, come on, bucko. Don't you want a balloon?
I'm not supposed to take stuff from strangers. My dad said so.
Very wise of your dad, Georgie. Very wise indeed. I, Georgie, am Pennywise the Dancing Clown. You are Georgie. So now we know each other. T-Rex.
I guess so. I gotta go.
Go? Without this?
My toes!
Exactly. Go on, kiddo. Take it. Oh. You want it, don't you, Georgie? Oh, of course you do. And there's cotton candy and rides and all sorts of surprises down here. And balloons, too. All colors.
Do they float?
Oh, yes. They float, Georgie. They float. And when you're down here with me, you float
To get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
Hey Jawheads, it's Matt K with a quick reminder of this month's riddle. Here we go. My sister? Yeah, where is she now? Most of you first got to know me as a kid when I made a movie with my friends. Luckily, it wasn't a train wreck. If you see me at a party, come and talk to me. I will tell you what it was like to work with Coppola 2 different times. Later, I became a model and then a young horror writer. Nothing bad can happen because watching over me is none other than Angelina Jolie. Who am I? Write us at feedback@cinemajaw.com with your answer, and one lucky Jawhead will win a prize pack or the chance to take me on in trivia on an episode of Cinemajaw. Good luck.
Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
And we are back on Cinemajaw, hanging out with director Joe Chappelle. We have not talked about Chicago Fire yet. And we actually had Joe Mancuso, who is, what's his character's name on?
He plays the character Joe Cruz.
Joe Cruz. It was confusing because he's Joe Cruz on the show, but he's
Right.
Joe Mancuso. He came on here, episode, I think 3, throw that in the fish tank, late fish tank. And I know the topic was fire scenes in movies, since it was Chicago Fire. And one of the questions I asked Joe was, when you're making a show like Chicago Fire that obviously has a lot of dangerous moments where you got fire going on, what are all the precautions? How does it go? And he answered it from an actor's standpoint. So I turned that question to you, being a director of Chicago Fire, filming those scenes when there's fire going on, things exploding. What does it start with? Storyboards, where everybody's going to be? Take us through that process.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's anytime fire is used, it's the safety precautions, as they should be, are very, very involved. And you always start with the storyboard. We start with the storyboard just for creative, and everybody signs off, this is creative, this is what we're going to do. We're lucky on a day so this is one thing, when you're storyboarding these fire scenes, we really can do safely. You have to imagine you can do maybe one shot an hour.
Wow.
Because you have to go through the process and test it, and then once you get tested, you have to, it's either, if it's going to be the actor or if it's going to be a stunt guy or a stunt woman in the scene, we have to kind of give them to walk them through it in a safe way. And so it's just all these safety steps.
So when you get handed a script that's got like a ton of fire scenes in it, are you like, oh no?
You just know it's going to take forever.
Wow.
And and because there's always that constant tension in television, it's like you got 9 days to do an episode. Well, if they write a big fire scene, it's going to take a day and a half just to do that scene, or maybe 2 days. And then so it's a negotiation with the writers, like, how important is this fire in terms of the rest of your drama and your episode? Or then we have to go to the network and say, we need more time for this. We need an overage to cover this fire. So it's not something you just get and you just show up on the day and shoot. It all has to be mapped out in advance.
It's crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah. Now your new television show that you're working on, The Godfather of Harlem, intriguing name right off the bat. I believe Forest Whitaker,
yes,
is starring in this. What can you tell us about this?
I can tell you,
project?
it's called Godfather of Harlem. It's based on a real life African American gangster, a guy named Bumpy Johnson, who basically ran Harlem from like the 30s through the 60s. And our story, the show takes place in the mid 60s. And so it's a gangster show because it's gangster. So it's the drug trade in Harlem, and it's Bumpy, and he's African American, and it's his dealings with the Italians who who are kind of competing and also supplying him at the same time. So it's that. So it's definitely I think it's going to be a great genre show. But what's really interesting about it is that the backdrop is the civil rights movements of the 1960s. So Bumpy Johnson, the real Bumpy Johnson, he knew Malcolm X and was a friend of Malcolm X. So Malcolm X is a character on the show. It's got a great cast. It's Forest Whitaker as Bumpy. Vincent D'Onofrio plays Vincent Gigante, who is the Italian mobster kind of running.
This is already great.
It's great, right?
Yeah.
Giancarlo Esposito plays this very charismatic congressman, a real congressman, a guy by the name of Adam Clayton Powell, who was this larger-than-life, philandering, but still yet a brilliant, representative for the people of Harlem. Paul Sorvino's in the show because of the gangster connection.
Nice.
And it's really, really cool. And I have to say, although that really high-powered cast, there's one guy who you probably have not heard of, and I had not heard of him. His name is Nigel Thatch, and he plays Malcolm X. And if you've seen the movie Selma, he plays Malcolm in that movie. He plays Malcolm in our show. And, he's so in all these scenes, he's going against all these heavyweight actors, especially Forest Whitaker, Academy Award-winning actor. And Nigel you cannot take your eyes off this guy.
Wow.
If the show gets any attention, I hope it does wonders for his career because he's so riveting. So, I'm really excited about the show. It's going to be on Epix, a subscription service. I think what I heard last was it'll premiere in October.
Nice.
All right. Maybe we'll have to get you back when it's
I would love to come back and
Yeah.
talk about it because it's really great. And I think if it finds its audience, it should do well.
Well, the trailer's out, right?
Well, there's a teaser trailer that was put out not that long ago.
All right,
YouTube.
we'll throw that in the show notes so everybody can get a taste.
Awesome.
Great. And again, Jawheads, Joe's latest film, An Acceptable Loss, is out on video on demand anywhere you can rent your movies, so please do it.
Yeah, you should.
Before we get to trivia, and before we get to that Hellboy review, we did throw a few items into the fish tank, and I know Phil wants to swim up to the top. Let's open up that fish tank.
Wait a moment! It's fish! Isn't it?
DC! Wake up! Wake up!
No, Pat, it's a giant glass bowl. Hey, there's some fish folk.
Who's coming with me besides Flipper? Here.
That's a Sicilian message. It means Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Good to be out this week. I don't want to waste too much time up at the top. I will just say, for Jawheads listening at home, a fun drinking game for you is throughout the fish tank how many times I said Joe was right. Because the guy, I swear to God, the guy knows everything. Matt, you got to be scared for trivia. That being said, I'm going to start with one question I threw in here silently for myself, and any of the Jawheads who maybe have started listening since this happened or just maybe missed the episode. It was, when was Colleen on talking about An Acceptable Loss? And that was episode 411. It came out February 25th. And that, again, Joe talked about An Acceptable Loss. We also talked about it a little bit more in depth when Colleen was here originally in that episode, if you want to know more. Now, onto the ones that you guys had thrown in. When did Night of the Living Dead come out? Joe was right on that one. It came out in 1968, so to the T.
Tumultuous year. A tumultuous year.
Yes, it was.
I guess. I don't know anything about history.
Phil wasn't alive then. Neither was I.
Who knows what
Two
happened?
assassinations.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, see, I didn't do good in history. When did Internal Affairs and King of New York come out? So Internal Affairs came out January 12th, 1990, and King of New York only a few months later, September of the same year, September 22nd.
So you're right, and right next to each other, huh?
I thought it was the 80s, but it's 90s.
Just barely the 90s. When did Friday the 13th Part 6 Jason Lives come out? This one was 80s. This classic came out August 1st, 1986.
There you go.
I knew it.
Good one.
Here we have one. Which number movie of James Bond was Live and Let Die for Roger Moore? Again, Joe was right. It was his first.
Aha.
I thought Octopussy was the first one for Roger Moore.
No, that was later.
Yeah, so Live and Let Die was first in 73, followed by Man with the Golden Gun, 74, and then Spy Who Loved Me, 77.
Oh, Octopussy was late.
Yeah,
Moore.
that was 80s.
Yeah. Matt, you were way off. Again, not boding well for trivia.
And I'm usually dead on with the Bond stuff.
And it's spy trivia. I'm sweating
Right.
here.
Yeah.
Where is Edgar Allan Poe buried? And he died and was buried in Baltimore, Maryland.
Joe was right.
Another one, Joe. Yeah.
That's just because I worked there for a couple of years. That's the reason I knew that.
And then our last minute question thrown in here. What was the episode that Joe Manuso came on? That was almost exactly a year ago. That was May 7th, 2018 for episode 371. And that was Best Fire Scenes, just like Ryan said.
That was a good one. That was everything, Phil?
That's all.
Jump back in that fish tank.
Will do.
All right, Matt. Brings us to Hellboy, a big red demon with good intentions who saws off his horns to fit in. Might not sound like the best comic book character to make a film adaptation of. However, in 2004, in the hands of Guillermo del Toro, he was perfect. His story is filled with gory action scenes as he fends off dark forces with some dry, dark humor mixed in for kicks. Having just watched the original, it's easy to say Del Toro and Ron Perlman got it perfectly right. But not even that stops Hollywood from rebooting. So in steps David Harbour as Hellboy. I took the elevator down to the last floor on Earth to see if this reboot had anything new to offer.
Why do you fight for those who hate and fear you? You were meant for this. Out of the ashes, New Eden will emerge.
Okay, I'd appreciate a prophecy with more relatable stakes.
Matt, it's only been 15 years since the first Hellboy, so I am happy to report that this new film is not a straight-up reboot and retelling of the original. We do get a flashback to Hellboy's origin, but it's quick. The main storyline, that of the Blood Queen, played by Mila Jovovich, being put back together to reign over Earth is completely new. That said, the story and tone of this film are the same as the Del Toro versions. I must mention, this one is rated R compared to the first two films at PG-13, so we get a little more blood, a little more gore here. The central plot, as I mentioned, concerns the Blood Queen, who was dismembered and had her body parts buried in various parts of England. A giant pig warrior, that's right, a pig warrior, is uncovering her body parts in an attempt to put her back together again. Will it work? And if so, what does she want with Hellboy? Yes, the story is a little out there, and definitely not as engaging as the first Hellboy film and story, but I was fine with it in general. Director Neil Marshall tries to follow in Del Toro's footsteps and make the action sequences gory, dark, and fun, and for the most part succeeds, but let's be honest, you can't pull off a Del Toro. As for David Harbour as our man in red, solid, very solid. I know a lot of people love Ron Perlman's take on it, but I had no issue with the new Hellboy here. Where I think it suffers, the fact we just did not need another Hellboy movie right now. It did not do anything vastly different with the character. It did not send the character or his story arc in a brand new direction. And it did not do enough to warrant its own existence as a movie. If you like gory action scenes with some grotesque creatures, see it. For the rest of us, skip it and watch the original on Netflix.
First of all, I have to applaud your use of Del Toro as a verb. That's awesome. How is Mila Jovovich? That's what I want to know.
She's a highlight in here as well.
She
Not
hasn't
enough
done
screen
much.
time. I know. And I think she could play the villain like this, like a Blood Queen.
That sounds cool.
It was really interesting. And I was so glad. So what I was telling our intern, Corbin, before everybody got here, I was talking, hey, we saw this movie. I said, well, I sort of did myself in here by watching the original Hellboy on Monday night right before the screening of this new Hellboy. And I think I just had too much Hellboy. I think there is a case you can have too much. It was, saw it again, and I was like, I've seen enough of this. The tone and everything's the same with these ridiculous scenes.
Is Abe Sapien in this?
I don't want to spoil everything.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, he's not a main character in the movie, I'll say that.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
That probably means yes, he's in it.
Well, nowadays they can never make a movie. I'd love to. I was thinking about this when I walked out of Hellboy, and this is not spoiling anything. Same with Pet Sematary. I'd love to know the percentage of films that end without hinting that there's a sequel.
That's an interesting question because I bet you it's near zero. Right?
Well, not quite. I mean, obviously, there's still some that are, it's definitely, that's its own movie. But I would say 80% of the movies we're seeing now leave it open to more or less some type of...
Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
Hellboy clearly does, and Pet Sematary does.
Is there an after-credit scene?
There is an after-credit scene.
That's another thing.
Introduces another character. It's the same exact what we're used to seeing.
Wow. I mean, how things have changed. And you said only 15 years ago? Like, that's like... yesterday. I can't believe it's been that long. 15 years.
Does not seem that long.
No.
2004.
That's crazy.
For a great scene that I did want to highlight is there's this weird scene where he's got to fight 3 very large giants. And I thought special effects wise it was really well done. And again, because it's rated R, he can really knock these giants off in some very gross and gory ways. That probably,
is it R for violence or is there sex?
Violence.
Okay.
All for violence.
Wow.
So you could just imagine the death scenes, as grotesque and perfect as they are in Del Toro's version, they're just amplified a little bit more here. And I don't know necessarily...
I'm down with that.
But I don't know if that's a great thing. It's not like, wow, you have to see it because of that. But I think they needed and wanted to take those liberties to explore that a little bit more.
That's interesting. I mean, the property's not necessarily known as like a violent, ultra-violent property. like the comics and such. Sure, it's there, but it's not like an action comic. It's more thinky.
I was sitting next to our critic friend, Jeff York, who's been on the show.
Sure.
He was a couple seats down from me, and he was laughing out loud at many times.
In a mocking way or enjoying?
No, he loved it.
Oh,
I mean,
great.
he was laughing hard. So for those that like this kind of humor, it's in there. I'm going 2 Jaws for the new Hellboy.
All right. Fair enough.
Didn't hate it.
It's the middle of the roader.
Yeah. All right. It brings us to trivia. Everybody loves to go out on a good contest of trivia.
It's fun.
In honor of Red Joan, we are playing spy movie trivia. It works like this, Joe. You're our guest. You get to choose if you want to go first. Let Matt go first. There are steals, and if you get hung up on any question, you get 1 trip into the fish tank for Filmy and Phil. They start off easy.
Matt, go first.
Wow.
All right.
He defers. Question number 1 over to Matt. I said they start off easy, so don't be mad at me, Joe. Question 1 over to Matt K. The Mission Impossible movies center around Ethan Hunt. Who plays him in all 6 films?
Tom Cruise.
Nice and easy. I like to get everybody comfortable.
Unless maybe he pulls his face off and it's somebody else under
Question 2 over to Joe. The Spy Who Shagged Me was another Austin Powers movie. What actor plays Austin Powers?
Mike Myers.
All right, we get the easy ones. Everybody's comfortable now.
Yep.
Question 3 over to Matt K. In the 1994 Jamie Lee Curtis Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Tom Arnold, also in the movie, what was the name of it?
True Lies.
2-1. Question 4 over to Joe. Name the actor who plays the lead agent, Harry Hart, in The Kingsman, The Secret Service.
I can see him. I cannot. Oh my! Colin Firth.
Well done.
2-2. We got a good ball game brewing here. Question 5 over to Matt K. Matt, Thunderball was a name of a James Bond film in which Bond tries to find 2 stolen atomic bombs. What actor portrayed James Bond in Thunderball?
Now my Bond confidence is all shot to hell. Thunderball. All right, just a process of elimination. That's an older one. I'm seeing the case of the VHS in my mind, and I'm pretty sure it was actually Sean Connery.
Was Sean Connery? I don't know what number Bond that was, but it was probably 5 or 4, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
Later in Connery's run,
It was after
right?
Goldfinger, I know that.
Okay.
There we go. 3-1, Matt K. Question 6 over to Joe. Alfred Hitchcock directed this 1935 film that was then remade in 1951. It is about Richard Hannay, who becomes caught up in preventing an organization of spies from stealing British military secrets. Name it.
I'm going to use my life on it.
Wow. Into the fish tank we go. Phil, what was the name of Alfred Hitchcock's 1935 spy film?
Alrighty, Joe. Your clue this week? If you follow this clue step by step, you're going to get the right answer.
The 39 Steps.
Good clue, Phil.
Yes, that was excellent. Thank you, Phil.
Everybody perfect here. 3-3, last 2 questions. This is how I like it to go, Matt.
Okay.
Question 7 over to you. Jack Ryan is a character that has been portrayed by many actors.
Yes.
Who played him most recently on the big screen in the film Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit?
Oh, man, you couldn't give me the TV question? Jim from The Office is playing him now, isn't he? Shadow Recruit. Man, I think it was somebody lame. I'm going to go to the fish tank.
Wow, back-to-back trips into the fish tank we go. Phil, who played Jack Ryan in Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit?
Alrighty, Matt. Your clue this week. He is the captain of the Enterprise.
Chris Pine?
Good clues by Phil all the way around here.
I will say I was this close to giving you a clue. He is definitely not lame, but
He's definitely
it was because
not
I was
lame.
a little salty.
I don't know. I was thinking Gerard Butler or something.
Well, here it is. Oh, boy. 4-3. Last question of the game. Joe, you can tie it up here. Oh, no. Oh, boy. Here we go. We all know that Matt Damon played Jason Bourne, okay? But what actor played Alex Conklin, the head of Treadstone, and the ultimate villain in the first Bourne Identity film?
In the first one.
In the first one. He was the head of Treadstone.
I am going to guess. Well, it's one of a couple actors. I'm going to say Chris Cooper.
Wow.
Wow.
Nice.
Yes.
I would not have even had a guess.
I was thinking, was it Tommy Lee Jones? Was it Chris? So Chris Cooper, good.
Yes.
I thought you were going to go with the Jeremy Renner question
That's
there.
what I thought, too. That's what I thought we were going with that one.
This has not happened in a long time. We end the game 4-4. Everybody perfect. So it comes down to a jawbreaker.
All right. Well, I'm happy with the tie for
Me
the
too.
record.
Can we?
We
No.
can shake now. We can shake now.
This jawbreaker, the question goes over
We just
to
shook hands.
the jawbreaker is this, Joe. Daniel Craig, best James Bond of all time or no?
He's great, but it's Connery.
That's wrong.
No,
it is Daniel
you're wrong.
Craig.
It's-
No, it's
it's-
Daniel Craig.
it's Sean Connery,
I'm
for
kidding,
God's
I'm
sake.
kidding. The real jawbreaker is this. Age of Mike Myers, closest to. Matt, you got a guess on Mike?
And we're not talking about Michael Myers, the
No,
the
we're
serial
talking
killer.
about the Spy Who Shagged Me actor.
Man, I would put him in his mid to late 50s. I'll say speed limit, 55.
Joe, you got a guess?
That's exactly where I was going to go. I'll say 56.
55 years old.
That's right.
Wow. You guys were right on top of that one.
Yeah.
Boy, oh
That
boy.
was officially a tie.
Heck, yeah, that was a heck of a game of
That
trivia
was.
right there. Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Always ends on a high note.
For sure. It's
Love
fun.
it. All right, brings us to the end of a very fun jaw.
Indeed.
Yes.
How about
First and foremost, we got to thank our guest, Joe. Thanks for coming on Cinemajaw.
Guys, it was great. Thank you for having me.
We also got to thank our engineer, the guy over there turning all the knobs, pressing the buttons, Phil me and Phil.
Oh, yeah, always happy to help. Thank you, guys.
Also got to thank our sponsors.
Yes, thanks to the Chicago Podcast Co-op, who help us get cool sponsors like Cards Against Humanity.
If you would like to support Cinemajaw, the easiest way to do so is leave us a review wherever you are listening to this podcast.
And while you're there, click subscribe. It's one extra click and it helps us out tremendously.
Until next week, I'm Rye the Movie Guy.
I'm Matt Kay, and keep on jawing about the movies.